The Yuuzhan Vong began their campaign before the first warship crossed into known space. Executor Nom Anor, operating under diplomatic cover years before the invasion proper, infected Mara Jade Skywalker and roughly 100 other New Republic diplomats with coomb spores, microorganisms he engineered specifically to destroy the Jedi Order. In normal beings, the spores broke down the victim's molecular structure and delivered an agonizing death within weeks. That was the advance work, the diversionary play. Mara Jade survived because of force abilities most organic beings don't possess. The others didn't all fare as well. When the main invasion force arrived in 25 ABY, their primary ground weapon was the amphistaff, a living serpent 2 to 3 meters long, genetically engineered from creatures native to the Vong's long-destroyed homeworld. A warrior directed it at a target's eyes from 20 meters, and the venom entered the bloodstream, choked off the oxygen supply, and delivered 20 hours of excruciating death. As Wedge Antilles noted after studying them in the field, the amphistaff isn't just a Vong's weapon, it's his most important ally. With an amphistaff in his arsenal, a Vong is never truly alone. For heavier engagements, they brought fire breathers. 10-meter leviathans with hides thick enough to withstand all but a turbolaser blast. Their proboscises deployed streams of gelatinous flame, and their pores exhaled anti-laser aerosols that degraded standard blaster fire. They were first encountered on Gyndine, where they burned the forests and boiled the lakes. Warmaster Tsavong Lah characterized the invasion's purpose directly to Leia Organa Solo. We don't live side by side with impurity. Your civilization is built on abominations. Your galaxy is polluted. We have come to cleanse it. Every one of those weapons, the coomb spores, the amphistaff venom, the fire breather flame, requires a biological target, a bloodstream, a nervous system, tissue that can be infected, choked, or burned. Droids have no bloodstream, no nervous system, no pores to absorb spores through. The coomb spore that killed within weeks had no biological mechanism to interact with the droid chassis. The amphistaff venom that choked off organic oxygen supply had no oxygen supply to find. The entire Vong weapons doctrine targeted systems that droids simply don't possess. That theological hatred of machines wasn't arbitrary. Legend sources trace it to a catastrophic war in the Vong's original galaxy, a conflict between two ancient droid civilizations, the Silentium and the Abominor, that threatened to wipe out every sentient species caught between them. The Vong survived, barely, developing biological weapons to defeat their mechanical enemies with help from their living homeworld, Yuuzhan Tar. They drove the droid races out of their galaxy. Then, they spent thousands of years crossing the intergalactic void, carrying that victory as theology and that hatred as scripture. Their own ancient texts describe the moment plainly, as recorded by the Vong priest Harar. It appears we were invaded by a race that was more technological than animate. We called on the gods for protection, and they came to our aid, providing us with the knowledge we needed to convert our living resources to weapons. We defeated the threat. They arrived at this galaxy expecting to face machines. The machines had already been scrapped. In 19 BBY, Darth Vader traveled to Mustafar and killed the Separatist Council. Then he transmitted the signal that shut down every CIS droid in the galaxy. The Empire collected survivors and decommissioned them systematically, hunting units across former Separatist worlds, melting them down, dumping them in junkyards across 100 planets. Some droids ignored the shutdown and survived for decades in remote holdouts. A Separatist tactical droid named Kalani remained operational years later, still seeking a way to end the Clone Wars in a Separatist victory. Gizor Delso reactivated a small droid army on Mustafar before the Empire destroyed it. These were remnants. The full force, what legend sources describe as perhaps the largest droid army ever assembled, outnumbering clone troopers roughly 100 to 1, was gone. The base infantry unit, the B-1 battle droid, cost 1,800 credits. That figure is sourced directly from the 2007 Star Wars Saga Edition rulebook, the most specific Legends pricing document for CIS hardware. One used speeder's worth of credits per soldier. 24 years before the Yuuzhan Vong reached the galaxy's edge, the galaxy spent 1,800 credits apiece to destroy the one force type the Vong's weapons literally couldn't touch. That is the indictment. Everything else is the evidence. Before going unit by unit, one reframe needs 30 seconds. But one battle droids carry a specific reputation problem. The Clone Wars series spent years treating them as comic relief, hesitant, stumbling, delivering existential observations mid-firefight. One famous B1 stopped in the middle of an engagement, surveyed the situation, and observed, "Why do we even try? They're just going to kill us." The franchise plays that line for laughs. It shouldn't. A droid that has accumulated enough battlefield experience to articulate the statistical reality of its own survival odds, and then continues fighting anyway, isn't demonstrating stupidity. It's demonstrating something the galaxy was in the process of creating and then deliberately discarded. The Clone Wars lasted 3 full years. The CIS army held ground across hundreds of worlds, long enough to force the Republic into training and fielding approximately 2 million clone soldiers, at roughly 2 million credits each, just to maintain military parity. A force that required that response from the most powerful military entity in the galaxy wasn't a punchline. Against an enemy whose most lethal weapons it physically couldn't feel, the math runs very differently. At 1,800 credits per unit, the cost of a single clone trooper could theoretically purchase more than 1,100 B1 battle droids. That ratio, verified from the Saga Edition RPG, reflects the CIS Army's actual design philosophy: saturation over quality, flood force over elite force. Let the cost per kill ratio work in your favor. Against the Yuuzhan Vong, that math becomes something else entirely. The Vong's ground warfare doctrine was built around attrition through biological casualties, coomb spores, venom, the psychological devastation of watching comrades die over 20 hours. Their entire weapon profile assumed organic losses accumulated meaningfully. A Vong warrior in full Von Dune crab armor who destroyed 50 B1 battle droids before being swarmed under had cost the Galactic Alliance 90,000 credits, less than the price of a single Magna Guard. The warrior's cost to the Vong, irreplaceable. For further scale, a single Imperial-class Star Destroyer cost roughly 3.88 billion credits in Legends pricing. That figure implies a single capital ship's budget could theoretically field over 2 million B1 battle droids. That calculation is an order of magnitude illustration, not a balance sheet entry. But even as an illustration, it reframes the question of what the galaxy walked away from. The operational field ratio within the CIS Army ran approximately 1 B2 super battle droid for every 100 B1s. B2s cost between 3,000 and 3,300 credits and operated with independent droid brains, no central control signal required. Droidicas ran 21,000 credits. The entire hierarchy was priced for mass deployment in a way no organic military had ever matched or attempted. Flood a contested theater with bioweapon-immune infantry at that price point, and the most sophisticated organic weapons the Vong had developed across thousands of years become functionally inert. Ethor fell to biological agents in 25 ABY. The planet was subsequently destroyed. Coruscant fell 2 years later. An estimated 100 billion citizens killed in the conquest alone. These weren't inevitable outcomes against an immune force. They were outcomes shaped entirely by the biological nature of the defenders, and their defenders' reliance on weapons that required a biological army to fight. Here is the part of this argument that most people don't fully account for, and it matters as much for the tactical case as for anything else. The Clone Wars ran for 3 years. During that period, the Republic maintained standard protocol of wiping astromech and support droid memories after every mission, destroying accumulated experience to prevent classified information from becoming a liability. The CIS wasn't as systematic about this for its battle droids. Units that fought from Geonosis in 22 BBY to the final engagements in 19 BBY accumulated 3 years of continuous combat without systematic resets. Droids in the Star Wars universe develop something like personality through accumulated experience. The galaxy's own lore documents this across C-3PO, R2-D2, and dozens of other units that were never wiped. Without memory erasure, experience accrues, patterns accumulate, and behavior adapts in ways the original programming didn't anticipate. The B-1s that survived 3 years of the Clone Wars weren't the same units that shuffled off Geonosian assembly lines at the war's start. Unit cohesion developed. Individual droids began registering their own continued function as something more than incidental. Not fear, exactly, but something that functioned like self-preservation instinct emerging from experience. The Clone Wars era B-1, sitting in the middle of a firefight and doing the survival math out loud, was 3 years into that process when the signal went out from Mustafar. The army the Empire scrapped in 19 BBY was the army at its most experienced. The galaxy shut it down at exactly the moment it was becoming most effective, and 16 years before the one war where none of its accumulated knowledge would have been vulnerable to a biological weapon. Between 28 and 29 ABY, deep into the Yuuzhan Vong War, 3 years after the fall of Coruscant, a privately owned platoon of B-2 super battle droids on the planet Mantessa in the Oris sector fought a Yuuzhan Vong invasion force. That force included fire breathers. To be specific about what that means, 10-meter biological heavy support organisms deployed by the Vong for clearing entrenched positions. Hides resistant to all but turbolaser fire. Pores exhaling anti-laser aerosols that degraded standard blaster effectiveness. Proboscises spewing gelatinous flame. The same creatures that burned the forests on Gyndine and boiled its lakes. The Vong brought them to Mantessa to take the planet. The droids won. The unit was called the Orange Panthax. The engagement is sourced directly to the New Essential Guide to Droids, written by Daniel Wallace, published in 2006, which records on page 81 that a platoon of B-2 super battle droids, dubbed the Orange Panthax, beat back an occupation. Wikipedia's Battle of Mantessa article, sourced additionally to the Essential Atlas, records Galactic Alliance victory. Yuuzhan Vong casualties listed as most of the invasion force. Orange Panthax casualties listed as light. Cal Omas, Chief of State of the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, personally commended the Orange Panthax afterward. A sitting head of state officially recognizing a droid platoon for military action against the Vong. Not a Republic fleet, not a Jedi team. A privately owned platoon of B-2s on a world in the Oris sector stopped an invasion that included biological heavy weapons, and the galaxy's top political leader put it on record. The B-2 was the right unit for this specific fight, for documented reasons. Unlike the original Trade Federation B-1 models, the B-2 Super Battle Droid carried an independent droid brain and operated autonomously. No droid control ship, no central signal dependency. Its armor was built to absorb direct fire. Legends sources confirm the B-2 frame could take laser cannon blasts square to the chest plates and keep moving. Against fire breather flame that exhausted anti-laser aerosols to degrade standard weapons, that durability mattered in a way organic infantry structurally couldn't replicate. No training makes organic tissue resistant to gelatinous fire. No amount of courage changes a bloodstream's response to venom. The Orange Panthax weren't state military assets. They were privately owned hardware. Scale what a single privately owned platoon accomplished in the Oris sector to the industrial force the CIS had deployed across hundreds of worlds during the Clone Wars, and the shape of what was thrown away becomes concrete, not theoretical. Droidekas brought something no other CIS unit provided: personal deflector shields. documented in legend sources as capable of deflecting or absorbing virtually any manner of energy or projectile fire. Polarized to allow their own blaster bolts through while stopping incoming attacks. An individual droideka in combat position was a rolling fortress. The documented mechanical limitation is important. Droideka shields stop high-velocity attacks, fast projectiles, blaster fire, artillery. The shield handles those. Slow or stationary objects pass through. That specific vulnerability is where the Vong's primary weapons create a genuine open question. The amphistaff operates in three forms: rigid staff, flexible whip, or thrown spear. It spits venom at 20 meters, a projectile at range. As a whip in close quarters, it strikes at melee speed. Whether a droideka shield registers an amphistaff whip strike as slow enough to pass through is a question no legend source has resolved directly, because no documented engagement put a droideka face-to-face with a Vong warrior. The mechanical properties of both exist in the lore, they just don't cleanly map to each other. Amphistaff venom spit across 20 meters is a fast projectile. The shield math probably favors the droideka there. The genuine uncertainty sits in close quarters melee, where the amphistaff is slowest and the warrior cast is most dangerous. Drop that specific question in the comments. There are people who've done the mechanical math on this, and they disagree. That's worth an argument. Vong warrior cast fighters wore Von Duen crab armor, living exoskeletal plating documented as resistant to blasters, slug throwers, and even lightsabers. Against a standard B1 blaster, that armor creates a real problem for individual engagements. A single warrior in full Von Dune crab could absorb B1 fire until attrition eventually buried him in numbers. Magna Guards addressed the opponent that standard B1 flood force couldn't reliably stop. At a widely cited Wikipedia Legends price of roughly 90,000 credits, a figure with some conflicting data in RPG sourcebooks, but the most common in-universe number, a Magna Guard still cost less than a third of a TIE Defender and less than 5% of a clone trooper. Against Vong warrior cast fighters in melee, a Magna Guard carries electrostaffs, moves at non-organic speeds, and was originally programmed to fight force-sensitive opponents, among the most dangerous melee combatants in the galaxy. Vong warriors hadn't modeled their doctrine around something that didn't breathe, didn't tire, and didn't recognize pain as a tactical variable. BX series commando droids operated as infiltration units, autonomous, designed for small unit strikes and targeted elimination. Against the Vong's command structure, that capability pointed at one specific target, the Yamask. These biological war coordinators directed entire fleets and ground engagements through gravitational wavelength communication. The Wikipedia Yamask article records plainly, if the Yamask was destroyed or badly injured, a Yuuzhan Vong warforce typically descended into chaos without the guiding influence of its Yamask. The New Republic eventually developed gravitic amplitude modulators to jam Yamask signals, but that took years of analysis after capturing a specimen at the Battle of the Black Bantha. A CIS tactical droid with 3 years of accumulated battlefield data might have reached that solution faster. Commando droids conducting targeted strikes on Yamask installations would have hit the Vong's coordination architecture before a full engagement developed. Dovin basals are the strongest real counter-argument, and they deserve a direct answer. These gravitational organisms powered Vong vessel propulsion and shielding. Against pursuing ships, they degraded conventional deflector shields each combat round until depleted, confirmed in Legends sourcebook material. They could pull objects out of the air at sublight speeds. Droid starfighter wings operating against Vong capital ships would have faced a gravitational disruption that standard defensive countermeasures couldn't fully address. Naval engagement against Vong fleets was a documented problem for any mechanical force operating in space. Ground level is a different question. No Legends source documents Dovin basals disrupting droid electronics at the individual unit level. Their mechanics are gravitational, not electromagnetic. A Dovin basal manipulates gravity wells and degrades energy shields through gravitational interference. It doesn't generate electromagnetic pulses capable of knocking out independent droid processors. The Vong never developed an EMP doctrine, for one specific reason. Their theological rejection of mechanical technology meant they never built electronics. The same ideology that made a mechanical army their worst possible opponent closed off the weapon category that would have countered it. No signal jamming, no electronic warfare assets, no EMP capability of any documented kind in the Vong arsenal. The warrior caste's melee advantage against standard B1 frames was real. Von Dune crab-absorbing blaster fire is a genuine problem for individual engagement outcomes. The B1 Flood Force doctrine relies on numbers overwhelming individual warrior excellence before the math runs out of droids. At 1,800 credits per unit, across a force that outnumbered clone troopers 100 to 1, those numbers existed at a scale the warrior caste's individual ferocity couldn't absorb. 50 warriors destroying 50,000 B1s across a contested front still leaves a manufacturing capacity that could replace them before the next engagement. The Yuuzhan Vong War ended in 29 ABY. The resolution required Zonama Seacoast, a living planet seeded from the Vong's own destroyed homeworld, and Jacen Solo's actions against Onimi, the hidden intelligence controlling Supreme Overlord Shimra Jamane. No conventional military force could have arranged those conditions. A droid army wouldn't have produced a different ending at that structural level. Every major battle before that ending, though, runs differently. The Galactic Alliance eventually reached the point of deploying Alpha Red, a pathogen engineered by CIS biotechnicians under director Diff Scour and scientist Joy Eichroth, designed to target the unique genetic strand present in all Vong-related biology and destroy it. When tested on Kalula, Alpha Red worked. It worked catastrophically well. It mutated, adapted to individual host genetics, and began attacking other species on the planet, killing the winged star insects unique to that world. The Alliance quarantined the system and never deployed the weapon at scale. Their own bioweapon was too indiscriminate to use against a biological enemy. The total death toll of the war, as recorded in Wikipedia's war entry, reached over 365 trillion sentient beings. A droid army doesn't catch pathogens. It doesn't require the galaxy to develop a targeted biological weapon and then refuse to deploy it because it kills everything. Coruscant's 100 billion dead weren't killed by weapons droids couldn't have stood in front of. They were killed by an enemy whose ground doctrine assumed biological defenders. The Vong crossed the void specifically prepared for a war against mechanical life. Their oldest texts encoded the droid civilizations they defeated as species memory. They arrived at this galaxy carrying weapons that worked against everything that breathed. Everything that breathed was all they found. The CIS droid army wasn't a perfect weapon. It was a cheap one and a scalable one, being slowly shaped into something more than the sum of its original programming through accumulated experience, through the particular kind of development that happens when you're not reset between battles. 3 years of continuous combat without systematic memory wipes. 3 years of learning which formations held, which approaches worked against which opponents, which ground favored what deployment. Unit cohesion that wasn't written into initial programming, but accrued through shared engagement, through the particular droid version of knowing who is reliable and what they do under pressure. They were the first mass-produced beings developing something like consciousness at industrial scale. They were getting smarter. They were getting better. The galaxy switched them off at the moment they had become most capable, and then 2 decades later faced a species whose ancient doctrine was built around defeating machines, and whose entire weapons arsenal targeted organic biology and nothing else. At 1,800 credits each, the galaxy had the right soldiers for the worst war it ever fought. They never got to fight it. Subscribe for more stories from Legends. There's a lot left to cover.